This is part 4 of a series on Gnosticism for today. Let's talk about readings and sources and a couple of films, places where you can find out more for yourself about Gnosticism. I've got a list here. One person I like to go to right away is Elaine Pagels, and she's written several books on Gnosticism, Christianity, other topics, but her original book on Gnosticism is still really good reading as an introduction, so I recommend it. I also recommend April DeConnick, and when I teach Gnosticism in school, I use her book, Gnosticism in the New Age. Excellent resource. If you go online, if you want some free stuff, if you go online to gnosis.org, I know the scholar who runs that, and it's a great repository of Gnostic sources. So you can read the original documents there in various translations, and you can also read a number of informative articles about Gnosticism. It's a great resource. Gnosis.org. I've spent so much time there. The Nag Hammadi Scriptures, edited by Meyer and a bunch of other people. So this is a recent translation of not just the scriptures that were found at Nag Hammadi, Egypt, in 1945, but other codices as well. And a codice is a loose leaf book. So in 1945, there was a farmer who was looking for some fertilizer, and he found a jar, broke it open, and there were 52 codices in there, which was an enormous find. 6 of them were duplicates, but even so, there were key documents in there on Gnosticism, as well as other kinds of writing. And up until then, we had a couple of findings in the past, going back to the late 1700s, but just bits and pieces. And so that was just a treasure trove of Gnosticism. So the Nag Hammadi Scriptures is a collection of those. You can check that out as well. And let's see, what else is on my list? So there's a really good collection called Voices of Gnosticism by Miguel Conner. Lots of different scholarly opinions about Gnosticism, and it's pretty clearly written there, in the interview format, so that's handy. Wisdom Sayings of the Gnostic Jesus is a book I published. It's pretty short, and it's mainly, there's an introduction, but after that it's Sayings of Jesus the Gnostic. So Jesus as he appears in the Gnostic texts. So the sayings on one side, and on the other side is a brief explanation I gave of what he was talking about. So that's a resource. That's one that you could just flip through and read what he has to say. At my website, chalkwist.com, so my last name.com, if you go to read and watch, it's a tab up at the top. There's a lot of stuff in there. One thing that's in there is a glossary for Gnosticism. And another thing there is a link to a paper called Eve Reconsidered that talks about her as a messenger of light, as somebody who awakened Adam. So the Gnostics told Genesis in their own way. It's a very different version of the story than the one a lot of us grew up with. Adam was basically laying there on the ground, kind of flopping around, and Eve comes up, and who's an emanation of the feminine face of God in Gnostic tales, and she awakens him and tells him, beware of the deep sleep. Beware of ignorance, beware of unconsciousness. So also at my website in the fiction section this time, there's a book called Tales of Terrania Rising. That's a free story collection. And in there is a story called Sacred Fictions that I wrote after being inspired by some imaginings about who first wrote these stories. How did they come about? So that was a fun story to write. There is at YouTube, on my YouTube channel, which is at Dr. Chalkwist, so at Dr. Chalkwist, there's a whole playlist called Gnostications. So these videos are going in there, but there's older ones that are longer on Gnosticism. So you can find that there. Then some films. So in the last video, I mentioned The Matrix. The Wachowskis had read Gnosticism, And so there's Gnostic and other mythologies included in the films. So Neo as a Gnostic savior figure, the Oracle as Sophia. Who else is in there? So Morpheus is a mythological figure from Greece. Morpheus is the god of dreams. Trinity, of course, most of us associate that with Christianity, but the idea of the Trinity, which is not in the Bible, probably comes from Valentinus the Gnostic. So it's fun to watch that film when you've read a little bit about Gnosticism or heard a little bit about it and kind of start, oh yeah, that's who that is. And, you know, other films, Dark City is a pretty famous Gnostic film. There's a really great film called Ink that's very Gnostic, and it's just, it's like a low budget film, but it's so well done. I keep going back to it. I use it sometimes when I teach Gnosticism. There's a French animated film called The Painting that's really good, and the last line of the film is especially Gnostic. And then The Truman Show. So we've talked about seeing through archons, understanding when you're facing something that isn't quite human. Not in the literal sense, but when somebody's in a state of psychological possession and they're bullying and controlling and dominating other people, whether that's an individual organization or an organization, and you see through that. There's a scene in The Truman Show where he starts blocking traffic, and because he's waking up, he's realizing what's happening. I'll say more about that later, but at one point he goes like that. It's a pretty cool moment. So more as we go.